WNYC Studios is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good morning again, everyone. Now we're going to spend some time in Queens related to the New York primary that's underway between Knicks fever, the World Cup's arrival, and some beautiful weather. You'd be forgiven for forgetting that early voting is already underway and campaigning is reaching its peak before primary day itself, which is next Tuesday. But Queens is really interesting this year. It has some of the most crowded, competitive races in the city, up and down the ballot. Candidates are running on everything from a casino at Citi Field to APAC money. Local, national, and global issues are all colliding in what we can fairly call the world's borough, right? If you know the population breakdown of Queens, it is the world's borough. With me now to try to make sense of it all is Mitra Kalita, co-founder of URL Media and CEO and publisher of Epicenter-NYC. Mitra, always great to have you. Welcome back to WNYC.
Thanks so much, Brian. It's great to be with you.
So, big picture first, why is this year's primary season in Queens so animated right now?
Well, I think I would liken it to 2021 when you had the exodus of the city council and you just had a number of people raising their hands to run, and you had very crowded races. And so the last time I felt this much energy, hundreds of people showing up at candidate forums was indeed a few years ago. I think you have a few things going on. One, people are leaving their seats. There's an old guard in the Assembly and State Senate. You have a Mamdani effect as well. So you have a number of candidates who, are running as progressive left candidates, I think emboldened by seeing what happened in the city last year. And then I think you also have kind of the tactics being used on social media, like people speaking directly to voters and seeing this as an opportunity to throw their hats in the ring. So I think you have a collision of a few trends in New York right now. You also have very, very diverse races. So that's just super interesting to me because I think in New York, we've had a lot of coalition building. You've had, for example, a South Asian Democratic Club or a Muslim political engagement organization. And some of the fruits of that now you're seeing people raising their hands to be much more a part of elected office.
Yeah, that's a lot. Now, listeners, we can make part of this segment our latest informal, unofficial, thoroughly unscientific New York primary exit poll. Who are you voting for any race that's taking place in Queens? It can be for Congress, it can be for state assembly, anything else. Electioneering, welcome here as early voting is underway. Who are you voting for any open seat in Queens? 212-433, I shouldn't even say open seat because some of them are contested seats against incumbents. 212-433 WNYC. From the 718, call in to the 212-433 WNYC 433-9692. Let's talk about the Mamdani effect that you mentioned. This is the first primary season since Mayor Mamdani took office in City Hall, of course, and before moving to Gracie Mansion, he began his political career in Western Queens, part of the area nicknamed, and I'd say affectionately nicknamed, the Commie Corridor by the political analyst Michael Lang. So is a lot of this taking place in that, kind of Western Queens, Astoria, Long Island City, Sunnyside, that whole area?
It is.
More than even other parts of the borough, partly because of Mamdani coming out of there?
You should go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear. It does sound like there's another voice in the background. Is that coming from your end somehow?
I'm talking to you right now. Do you hear me?
I hear you. Do you hear
Okay.
me?
Yes, I do. We're good.
Okay, so we'll
Okay.
figure out whatever that other source
All
is,
right.
but
All
you
right.
can continue. Go ahead, Mitra.
Okay. I was saying yes, very much the left-leaning candidates I think you're seeing in this area of Western Queens. But, there are some candidates who straddle multiple constituencies and political leanings in one district. So, for example, you have a opposition to Grace Meng right now in Chuck Park, who is a former diplomat. He left when Trump came into office. He's contesting Grace Meng. I would say Grace Meng has a little bit of Jackson Heights and the area that you're describing, but she also has parts
And
of
for people who
Corona.
don't know, that she's a member of Congress, Grace
She's
May.
a sitting member of Congress, an incumbent who's facing a challenger. And, so Chuck Park comes out and runs against her. And when I say the Mamdani effect, I mean, again, that he's running to the left of her, and this has become kind of a referendum on ICE and APAC money as he frames it, but also his conversation with voters. He's like skateboarding in the subway station. And so when I say that the Mamdani effect, of course, we can look at the politics of it, but I think it's also in how a new politician, like seeking to be elected to office, is actually communicating with voters. And I think that's a really important part of this as well.
Let's take a caller from Jackson Heights. Alexis, you're on WNYC. Hi, Alexis. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, Brian. Good morning. Longtime listener, actually now a second-time caller. But I'm calling from Jackson Heights, Queens, and specifically about the State Senate 13 race, which has frankly become almost a referendum on the Citi Field Casino here next to the stadium. And I say a referendum because we have two Jessicas running, and they are really on opposing sides of this issue. We have Jessica Ramos, who is the incumbent state senator from SD 13, who has stood in strong opposition against the billionaire developer Steve Cohen. And then we have JGR, Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, who is running to unseat her. She is running on a progressive platform. However, she has, been kind of standing in lockstep with the people who are here to develop this casino. And, it concerns me to hear somebody saying to tax the rich, and yet at the same time, they appear to be promoting a casino, which we know will be a regressive tax on, frankly, our working class immigrant communities here in Queens. So it's become a real kind of mudslinging sort of primary. Personally, I know I will be supporting our incumbent, Senator Ramos, because of the way that she has stood up to big money in this particular fight. I hate to see it get it so ugly. We have a beautiful community here, and we want to keep it that way.
When you say the casino would be a regressive tax on people of the area, do you mean just because a lot of working class people will spend a lot of money, lose a lot of money going there to bet or going there to play?
Absolutely. It's being sold to us as something that's going to, frankly, right the wrongs of the community going all the way back to the Robert Moses days, right? But this is a development that we know is going to basically just prey upon people who are most vulnerable, people who are having money problems, who think, hey, maybe this will be the time that I strike it rich and throw away, their savings at the casinos. We've been organizing neighbors here in Jackson Heights and all the way across to the other side of Flushing, people who've been working with home care health workers who've been deeply affected by this, many from the Asian community. And we know that there's a lot of addiction within those communities. So putting it literally right on our doorstep is only going to exacerbate those things. So while there are these promises of, community, funds and things, none of it's legally binding. And frankly, the money would be coming in off the backs of the working class folks who are coming in to gamble. It's not going to be high rollers funding this sort of thing. It's going to be our day-to-day neighbors, the folks who really can't afford to lose it.
Alexis, thank you very much for chiming in. And Mitra, how much is the casino a big issue in that two Jessicas race for state senate?
It's a huge issue. I do think it has divided the community. You do have two Jessicas and a Hiram Montserrat, which I don't know if you've heard that name in a while, Brian, but former state senator who was actually convicted of assaulting his girlfriend and also for mail fraud. And so you have this race that is a bit of a rough. I would agree that the casino has surfaced. The incumbent state senator Jessica Ramos also infamously endorsed Andrew Cuomo, and so I believe there was energy to primary her partly around that decision because she, of course, ran for mayor last year, in the 11th hour endorsed Andrew Cuomo, and also has been speaking against the casino. So you have Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, who's an assembly member running against her, and you have Hiram Montserrat, who also threw his hat into the ring. I actually live in Jackson Heights, as you know, and I would say this race is the one where you're seeing the most flyering. You have these three and their images, their photographs on the sides of buildings, of trucks. I mean, it feels like a big energy race right now. I think it is coming down to the casino for many voters, including the caller that just called in. Yeah.
Just to be clear, because I think you may have misspoken a little bit a second ago, it's Jessica Ramos who supported the casino, correct?
No, Jessica Ramos opposed
she opposes
the casino. That's right. She was the lone.
She opposed the
Yeah,
casino.
that's
Okay.
right. She opposed
Sorry,
the
I had that
casino.
backwards.
No, that's okay. It was a very, and for viewers who are listening, I know that they might want to look this up. There was a New York Magazine story where she kind of came out against the casino, and was the only elected in the area, and then they ended up being able to pass it by getting another. State Senator
Right.
John Liu, who has a portion of the land in his district, and that's how they were able to get that
So
through.
if
It's complicated, I know.
Yes, but if the progressive position, if we can identify it that way, is to oppose the casino, Ramos is on the progressive side of that. But as you say, she shocked a lot of people who were her allies on the left on so many things when she backed Cuomo over Mamdani for
That's
mayor.
exactly right. Yes.
And so that would leave people, conflicted about people for whom Cuomo is bad and the casinos are
That's
bad.
right.
That would leave
That's
people
right.
conflicted about Jessica Ramos and having to make a decision about whether to keep her in office.
And I think this is why, Brian, this is so important because local politics cannot just inherit the kind of hyperbolic, it's on this side or that side of national politics. And I think there is a lot of predictive behavior in these elections that we might see in the midterm elections. But that being said, like something like a casino, which is operating as a bit of a litmus test in some of these races. And we should spell out that it's not just in the state Senate race. The casino has come up as an issue for the Grace Meng versus Chuck Park race. It's come up in other races as well. And how the way you just laid that out, like it would be logical that if you're progressive, you would feel this way and that way. I mean, the casino also does have a lot of union support behind it because of those jobs. The folks that are supporting Steve Cohen and the Mets and Metropolitan Park, as the project is called, have also been pretty supportive of the nonprofits in the area. And, they're getting a lot of energy and support from different constituencies, and some of that is because we're also in a moment that the federal government has cut funding for some of these nonprofits. So it's a very complicated reality on the ground, even as the caller is absolutely right that the model of a casino preys on gambling addiction, right? Like that is a truth about their economic model. And yet again, these issues get more complicated as you come down to the local level and who's supporting it and why they might be supporting it.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about the very interesting races in the New York primary in Queens. We'll get to some more of them. We're not going to be able to get to all of the interesting races in Queens because there are so many, which is the premise of this segment, as we continue with Mitra Kalita, co-founder of URL Media and CEO and publisher of Epicenter-NYC, the epicenter of which is Jackson Heights. And you, with our informal, unofficial, thoroughly unscientific New York primary Queens exit poll in any of the races, 212-433 WNYC, 212-433-9692, call or text, or with a question. Another open Senate seat that maybe isn't getting as much attention as it deserves, this is state Senate seat, is the one being vacated by Michael Gianaris, who's leaving the Senate. He, for people who don't know, is the Senate Majority Leader, very powerful, very supportive of Mamdani, very supportive of New York City, and very influential in that respect as the Democratic leader in the, overwhelmingly Democratic New York State Senate. So remind us, why is Gianaris stepping away, and what's the race like to succeed him?
So it's a great framing there, Brian. So Gianaris is stepping away. He says he wants to spend more time with his family. I do think some of the overtures you've just mentioned do make me wonder if he has more of a future in politics. He's been a big Mamdani supporter. Yesterday, he just came out and endorsed Claire Valdez, who's running for Nydia Velázquez's open seat. The other kind of front runner there is Antonio Reynoso, of course, who's the Brooklyn Borough president. But he endorsed in that race. He has not endorsed for his own seat. So just to set that stage, it's the 12th district, the state Senate. You have Stephen Raga, who's the first Filipino American elected in New York State. He's an assembly member. He's a current sitting assembly member. He's the former head of Woodside on the Move. So kind of a known local figure. Shows up at a lot of events. I see him around the neighborhood a lot. And then you have Abir Coas, who has been endorsed by Mayor Mamdani. She's the DSA candidate. She moved to Astoria, I believe, about 2 years ago. We just interviewed her to get her origin story. And this is a really interesting race because you have a known figure, but you also have, to your kind of framing of Western Queens, like there's a lot of new people who live in Sunnyside and Woodside and Astoria. And many of them, see in Abir Coas, who is endorsed by Mayor Mamdani. She sat right next to him at one of the Knicks watch parties. She's getting a lot of shine because of his shine. She speaks a ton about Gaza and Palestine and kind of the connection among global politics and why she's running for state Senate. So she really is mobilizing, I think, a certain type of voter in New York City. Stephen Raga, I would say, has maybe the local advantage because he's been around for so long.
Does the state Senate have any sway over anything that happens in the Middle East?
Well, I asked that question, Brian, and she made a compelling argument about ICE and her own family and immigration and deportation that they faced. She is Palestinian American, and kind of the need for, at all levels for us to make these connections. That being said, in our interviews with these candidates, and we've really been trying to kind of dive deep on this question, we also did say, what would be your plans for the subway system, for example? And we're really trying to kind of bring it back home.
And you mentioned some of the endorsements in the New York 7 congressional race. That's the district that covers parts of Queens and parts of Brooklyn, from which Nydia Velázquez is retiring. And Claire Valdez, DSA candidate, endorsed by Mayor Mamdani. Antonio Reynoso, progressive enough that he's endorsed by the Working Families Party, the current Brooklyn Borough president. We have a listener voting for the third candidate in that race. Listener writes, I'm voting for Julie Wan for New York 7, definitely not voting for Claire Valdez since she's endorsed by Zohran Mamdani. So, it becomes, to some degree, I guess, a kind of proxy for what people think of the mayor.
That's right. And I think that's what we're going to see is, are people going to vote with the energy of the Mamdani endorsements? Are they voting based on who they know and what they know? Is there something we're not considering here? I was surprised because we've been moderating a number of these candidate forums. I mean, one thing I'll say, they're attracting like 200, 300 people at a time, Brian. I have not, and the last time you and I talked about elections was 2021. So maybe it's that we haven't seen these races in person like this before. But again, the energy feels similar to Mayor Mamdani's election last year. I mean, it's still hundreds of people packing halls to hear from the candidates.
There's also Mamdani's own assembly seat, or his old assembly seat.
That's right.
That's the job he had before he was elected mayor. From Astoria, Diane Moreno won the February special election by a landslide after Mamdani vacated to move into his new job. But now she's being challenged by another DSA
That's
member, Mayor Jabaida, if I'm saying her name right.
Mayor-
Why are we
you are.
seeing DSA versus DSA in a seat that was just won by one of them?
Yeah, well, Mary Jabaida is also a known figure, especially in ethnic media circles. Bangla Patrika I've been covering New York City for on and off for 30 years. Bangla Patrika has been around. Time Television is a Bangladeshi TV station in Queens, and she's been a correspondent there. So Mary Jabaida in certain communities is quite well known. She's a member of the DSA. And, what she says about running against Diana is that, I'm in the DSA. It bothers me that this movement that I love and this is a quote from her that she said, is becoming a movement of a certain type. It's detached from the local marginalized community. And so in her, I think you have a candidate who says, I've been on the ground and I'm DSA. I'm the type of candidate you want. I think it's an uphill battle. I will say that because Diana Moreno did win in a landslide and she has the advantage of being in office right now. And of course, she has the advantage of the Mamdani endorsement as well in his district.
Another caller on another Queens primary. Mark in Glendale. You're on WNYC. Hi, Mark.
Thank you, Brian. My current assembly person is Jennifer Rajkumar, and I voted earlier this week for the contested spot by David Orkin, who's been well endorsed. Jennifer Rajkumar has been there a little too long, and thanks to Mamdani coming in, I'm more interested in progressive voices. Additionally, I feel that Jennifer Rajkumar tied her wagon to the Eric Adams administration, and it's time for all of that to go away.
Thank you very much. Tell us about David Orkin versus the incumbent Rajkumar in that particular seat.
Super interesting race. So Jennifer Rajkumar, infamously for your viewers who are following the Adams administration, would show up often wearing red, very strategically placed next to him. I think that, that might backfire now on her because of the kind of affinity with Adams. I will say Epicenter is live streaming forum between Rajkumar and the challenger, and that's actually going to be in Jackson Heights. That's sponsored by the South Asian and Indo-Caribbean Democratic Club tonight. That's at 6:30 in a place called Tikana in Jackson Heights. If anyone wants to turn up, or you can also tune in on our live stream on YouTube. And one thing, Brian, I'll just say is that because of the energy that we're seeing around these, a little bit late in the game, we just started live streaming these so that more people could access them. And one other thing I'll say is that you cannot count on Jennifer Rajkumar is the first South Asian woman elected to office. I think even within her own communities, there's some controversy over her as a candidate. I mentioned the Eric Adams piece. She's also been affiliated with the Hindu right and the current Indian government, which is controversial among some South Asian audiences. So you asked the question about, but what does this all have to do with state Senate? In Queens, we are very uniquely this borough that probably cares as much about a casino and whether our garbage is picked up as we do about the politics back home. And so I think that's just another factor that's weighing on some of these races.
And I guess, Glendale, where the caller is from, is a relatively conservative neighborhood
Correct.
in New York City. I don't know if Maspeth, which is right around there, is also in that district. Another fairly conservative part of Queens. I know
That's
Woodhaven is in the district, but maybe that puts it in play for somebody like Rajkumar in a way that other parts of Queens, might not look seriously at a candidate like that. And of course, she's already won there in the past.
And I think it also just depends on turnout in some of these neighborhoods, right? How energizing is the challenger candidate? Some of it is the demographics. And don't forget, we talk a lot about transplants to New York City. It's been coming up a lot in these races, but in some of these neighborhoods that might have been much more kind of moderate Democratic strongholds, you also have a lot of young people moving in because they're affordable pockets of Queens right now as well.
You've raised this fight over who's a real New Yorker. I thought that was just kind of a J-Lo joke that's been going around the internet. But seriously, who's local and who just got here? But in a borough where almost everyone came from somewhere else, how much is that really moving voters?
I think it's, the J-Lo meme. I feel like in a city that's defined by immigrants, and I'm a New Yorker, I was born here, but I've come and gone. I'm defined by coming and going. So I'm very grateful that New York allows me to keep doing that. So I've been watching this kind of curiously. I think, though, in some of these races, and I'm seeing this online, with kind of the keyboard warriors that are weighing in on Facebook groups locally saying, look, but we've seen these electeds at our events, and someone who just moved into the neighborhood who, let's say, might be a DSA-backed candidate or might be running more opportunistically. There's definitely some questions around, are they a real New Yorker? And that's come up. And Claire Valdez, for example, is from Texas, the woman running against Adriano Espanol. I'm trying to remember her name.
Yes.
Daria Lisa.
That's Avila Chevalier. Daria Lisa Avila Chevalier in northern Manhattan and part of the Bronx. Yeah.
Right. Now, if we start getting into people's origins as kind of a litmus test of whether they're a New Yorker, like the city's in trouble because, again, we're so rooted in who's coming and going. But I think there's something underlying this, which is like, have they been showing up in the neighborhood? Are they known to people locally? I think that's what's underlying the test of who's a real New Yorker.
Right, as opposed to kind of the jokey J-Lo meme, which was really, if you are not born in New York, you're not a real New Yorker. But I saw the smile on her face when she was having that interview. All right, we will leave it there. My guest has been Mitra Kalita, co-founder of URL Media and CEO and publisher of Epicenter-NYC, talking about the really interesting slate of New York primaries going on in Queens right now. Mitra, always great. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Brian.